All right, we are back with our Friday edition of Seminole Sidelines. My name is Pat Burnham. I am a football and recruiting analyst for the Osceola, and I'm joined by the most famous recruiting analyst in the state of Florida, Charles Fishbein, who we lovingly call Fish. Fish, how is everything down in South Florida, buddy?
Good, man. Weather's nice. Finally feeling good. Ready to jump back in and knock this thing out of the park. Oh man,
Well,
somebody
we have
jumped.
a surprise guest today,
Yeah.
Bob Ferrante, managing editor of the Osceola, who's going to talk a little bit about spring practice with us before he ventures off to an early baseball game. I guess there's some bad weather in Charlottesville, Virginia today, so the Noles are going to line up against the Cavs a little bit earlier than possible. But Bob, Fish and I are going to get into a lot of recruiting because we've seen a tremendous amount of prospects on campus each and every practice this year. In fact, we'll have an update from you on Jamari Howard, Fish, who was on campus Tuesday. He's committed to Michigan State, but took an unofficial visit to Florida State on Tuesday. We saw Ashton Hampton, the three-star safety prospect, son of former FSU coach Lorenzo Hampton. Alonzo Hampton that practiced yesterday. We had an interview with him. There is a number of really outstanding looking prospects that will be on FSU's campus tomorrow. Practice will be closed to the media and to the public as it stands now. We will be down there trying to get as much information as we can post practice from the recruits as they leave tomorrow. Fish is got to have his hands full down in Miami at the Miami Rivals Camp / Combine. So we're going to talk a little bit about Fish, about who he's looking forward to seeing down there. But Bob, let's start with you. Obviously, another full padded practice for FSU yesterday. Saw a lot of good things. You wrote down some notes, and I'll join in with you as we go. But kind of what were some of your takeaways from yesterday's practice, and what are some of the things that you would like to hear, because we won't be able to see them on Saturday, but what are some of the things that you would like to hear coming out of the scrimmage on Saturday night when Mike Norvell and I believe the coordinators will probably have Zoom post-scrimmage interviews?
I think what everybody will want to hear is, yes, depth and competition across the board. How are the offensive and defensive line matchups going? The one position group that we could start to see some separation this spring, maybe not Saturday scrimmage, but at some point, is who's going to be the backup quarterback? Who's going to be the guy who, if he needs to go in for Jordan Travis, is going to be available? Is that Tate Rodemaker? Is it AJ Duffy? Probably not Brock Glenn, although Brock has looked really, really good for a young guy who I think is still 17 years old, remarkably. But I think that's a big question mark. We've been impressed with a lot of these newcomers, Pat. I think Vendravius Jacobs is maybe the biggest surprise.
Yes.
I just didn't know what to expect from him. But oh my goodness, I'm very reluctant to say that a true freshman receiver should be in line for starting reps at Florida State. That doesn't historically happen, but he may be in that receiver mix, that top 5-6 guys, especially with the Micah Pittman maybe out of the picture early, depending on how that injury heals up. You're looking at candidates. Who do you depend on? Ja'Kai Douglas is up there. Kentrell Poitier has been great.
Yeah,
We've seen Vendravius look really, really good. There's just a lot of good candidates. And again, we think about incremental improvements year to year. This receiver group from 2021, where it was just it was difficult to watch, to 22, where we saw competition. And again, I think that competition's been heightened there at receiver this spring.
Yeah, I think we all thought just because of Vandrevius being kind of smaller and being a kid that's supposed to be in high school right now, I think we all had limited expectations. We thought he would need a year in the weight room type of thing. And as Jerry and I were sitting at practice yesterday, he goes, it reminds me of a Kenny Shaw when he was a freshman, as far as from a size standpoint. But certainly he has been impressive in camp. And you mentioned Brock Glenn. Listen, he's a early enrollee, but a kid that really has looks to be mature beyond his years, and the way he handles himself on the practice field does not seem to be overwhelmed by anything. And listen, all these quarterbacks have strong arms. No one's got no one's throwing the ball with the pop gun. I mean, they can all let it rip at times. But what we have seen from Brock is that ball comes out of his hand just a tad bit differently than it does based against everybody else, and that's not a slight to anybody else. There was a veteran football coach that was at practice last week who said, "Listen, that kid Brock Glenn, the ball comes out of his hand different than anybody else," and so it's just not our observation; it's observations from guys that that we respect, and so it's been fun to watch. And I think the spring practice in its totality has been fun to watch. We continue to be impressed with Daryl Jackson. I know I got to talk about Daryl on Keith and Tom's show, Front Row Knowles, but I have not had a chance to talk about Daryl on our show. And, Daryl's been as impressive a guy on the defensive side of the ball for the newcomers as anybody. And listen, I think, and I could be wrong, I think it's really helped improve Fabian. Not that Fabian's ever not given effort, so don't. But I think it's that competition is actually kind of driving Fabian. I mean, he's had some really strong practices. Of course, I know he's finally totally healthy, and that does make a change. But I really do think the competition that he is bringing in there to that nose tackle position, Florida State's got a chance to be as good as we thought there. Then, of course, we've seen Josh Farmer and Dennis Briggs, and we haven't had a chance to see Braden Fisk. But just your thoughts on the newcomers on defense, people that have stood out to you.
It's interesting. Everybody has talked about Fabian Love is back. That's a big, impactful move. What does it mean for the entire defense? How does it make the linebackers' job easier? I think Kalen DeLoach was talking about just what Fabian brings, but also these other guys, and the potential is there, for the two Gadsden County High grads in Jackson and Farmer to be alongside each other, or matched up with another defensive tackle in the mix somewhere. Again, the depth is getting better year after year there. I think we will enjoy what we can see from Braden once that shoulder injury is more in the rear view mirror from him. I think Jared Verse has been very consistent this spring so far. He seems to be attacking the run a little bit better than last year. I think that's probably been an emphasis, for him to be better against the run. Gilbert Edmond looks really athletic. Patrick Payton, that speed rush is really fun to watch. These are good things, and everybody's kind of saying, well, how's it going to work out? Who's going to start? I'm not big on who starts up front. It's about rotational depth and being prepared in the event of an injury. These are good things. Florida State has depth that I think is really the envy of past Florida State teams, of past ACC teams. This is kind of the group that's going to be competitive with some of the best teams in the conference. And when you go up against Clemson, you have to have these kind of guys to pursue the quarterback, chase down the running back, and all that.
Yeah, and to me, another thing that stands out to me on defensively anyway is we've seen some improvement out of the linebackers. DJ Lundy looks like he's a little bit better than he was last year. Omar Graham flashed a couple times in practice yesterday. And that's a position where they really do need some kids to step up because they don't have any really proven depth behind DJ. Steven Dix looks a little bit more fluid than he has in the past, but certainly been impressed there. And then, of course, in the secondary, it's still hard to believe that KJ Kirkland is a early enrollee freshman. He just does not look like it. But I know you spent some time watching the secondary yesterday. Kind of who stood out there to you?
It seems like every day Kirkland makes some kind of play that just stands out. I mean, it's usually a pass breakup. He just seems to have good instincts, how he closes on the ball, reads the route, reads the movement of the receiver. It's interesting. The linebacker question is one that's kind of come up too. Who's going to be the backups to Bethune and DeLoach? Asked DeLoach yesterday about Omar Graham, kind of a guy who we're seeing emerge, and Kalen saying that Omar is less tentative, more comfortable, kind of knows what's expected, had the opportunity to be an early enrollee last year, so he's got a full year in. I think you could see an Omar step up there. You could see Brennan Gant year 2 as a linebacker, fully putting safety behind him. He's got some opportunities to get some more reps there. It's not the dream linebacker room. I think we all get that. Are we seeing improvement from 2021 to 2022 to 2023? And I think the linebacker group is getting a little bit better with each spring. And then Blake Nicholson arrives in August. So another guy to add to the mix. I think we all feel very highly about what Blake can bring as a runner and hitter. How good of an instinctual linebacker can he be? We want to really see him on the field and make that call. But you feel better about that linebacker room, I think, than you did in prior years.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've been impressed with. Listen, we'll have to see. Hopefully, we'll get to see a scrimmage or get to see some of that in the spring game. Because right now, the media is not going to get to see a scrimmage unless they were to open up either of the next 2 Saturdays to the public. And then, of course, we finally have converted Osceola's Kurt Weiler to a fan of the offensive and defensive lines. He spent the whole practice yesterday. He is usually quarterback and skill position, and that's because obviously I'm at practice sometimes, and Jerry and I kind of tend to watch the big guys. But listen, Julian Armella is a kid that is looks like he is getting ready to take the next step. One of his issues early on last year. Listen, he was a true freshman, so some of these things are to be expected. But one of his issues is he has a tendency to overextend at times, and we've seen less and less of that as they go through practice. And then, of course, we've mentioned Ken Portier. I mean, he just continues to show out at receiver, and then Jaheim Bell, who looks impressive, and I think he had his best practice of spring on Tuesday. I did not watch him as much yesterday as I did on Tuesday, but he came in here with all the hype, and that's great. He will be a weapon for sure for Mike Norvell, but Kyle Morlock kind of got overlooked once Jaheim signed, and he's been impressive as anybody. He runs extremely well. He seems, we saw him kind of those first couple of practices, the pace was a little bit different than what he had at Shorter. The level of competition was certainly different. And we saw at his first practice, his legs kind of gave out on him. And he seems to have made that transition to where, that's not as tough on him. But he has stood out. And, of course, we've talked about Brock. But just talk about some of the other guys that stood out to you yesterday offensively.
I think with, going back to Jaheim briefly, it's that red zone goal line kind of threat combinations that you can throw. Again, Jaheim, Johnny Wilson, Marcus Douglas. You've got height, you've got speed, you've got formations you can throw out there, 3 tight ends if you so choose. And then where do you line up a Jaheim Bell? Is he in the backfield? Is he off tackle? Is he, out wide? You've got just a ton of options there. Julian Armella looks a lot more comfortable. Looks very, very athletic, and I think is moving well. I would say, I think we could admit this, he was slowed by injury late last year. Yeah. That's tough. That's tough to be a freshman. You're trying to learn on the fly. Alex Atkins is yelling at you. You're not doing it right. Your technique is wrong, and you're hurting, and you're trying to remember, all these things that you've learned from the team meeting room. It's tough, and I think now you're kind of seeing. Yes, we all knew Julian Armella had potential. It's just a question of where are you going to slot him? How does it fit? How does he look compared to a more veteran guy? Julian's going to be in the mix. I think it's really kind of exciting to see his development for sure.
Yeah, and it looks like the offensive line battles are going to be everything we thought they would be. We're seeing some different combinations work together on a daily basis. No one unit seems to stay the same for very long. A lot of people, if it was a quarterback situation there where you were rotating them in and out, you'd be worried. But offensive line and defensive line, I think that's a very good thing. And I think these battles will continue to go on as we see people start shuffling around as they try to figure out their best 5 or 6. So that's something that has certainly not disappointed. And then, Bob, obviously we'll come back on Monday with a big show post-scrimmage to kind of break down what the coaches said, given the fact that we don't think we'll see anything. But just one question as we let you go for baseball. we've been at every practice, and every practice seems to be a known name from a recruiting standpoint. Somebody, a high priority guy. You have covered Florida State a lot longer than I have. You've been around when these recruits have come, when Jimbo was here and Willie and probably even Coach Bowden. When is the last time you remember seeing this kind of, I guess, success in getting guys on campus? I don't remember it with Willie. I certainly don't remember it Mike's first year. Of course, there was COVID, so that's one of the reasons there was nobody there. But just your impressions on the type of kids they're getting to campus.
Yeah, these guys are using their spring break to figure out which college campus they want to visit. We saw that with I forget the name of the Texas kid, but was vacationing in Destin and decided to find Tallahassee on the map and just come out and look. And then Tallahassee, Florida State, Mike Norvell, make that impression. Guy wants to come back again. So we're seeing a lot of guys who are curious. It's 10 wins, it's success on the field. And then they go out there and they say, well, Mike Norvell, it's very impressive. They talk to a Florida State veteran. Oh, I'm having fun here. Your best recruiters are your veterans, the guys who are, praising what's going on the field. I think there is still, I would call it some Chamber of Commerce recruiting. There's a lot of, let's bring out a lot of teams. Let's bring out a lot of local guys.
Oh, yeah. We saw
a lot of these guys. A lot of these guys are probably not Florida State or Power 5 type prospects, but it is cool for guys to show up and say, I got to see a Florida State practice. I got to sit in the meeting room and listen to this guy or talk to that player. They may not ever play at a Florida State or a Power 5, but just they're kind of getting that exposure to what this program is all about. So Mike Norvell, the program, they've created a buzz that I just think we haven't seen. And that's because of Mike Norvell's energy. It's the culture. It's the winning. That's what you want to see from a program right now.
Yeah, and listen, there's quite a buzz, and Fish and I'll kind of break this list down as we go. But there's going to be an impressive number of kids on campus this weekend. But Bob, you're getting ready to go to baseball. What's the forecast for the Noles in Charlottesville?
I think the Noles forecast right now across the board is partly cloudy because we just don't know what to make of this inconsistent team. It's like everything else. If you've got a little bit of pitching and a little bit of defense, you've got a chance. When they're playing their best, they can win. When they're not playing their best, it's not pretty to watch.
Listen, generally when there's a coaching change, but there was a reason for it. And typically that's because of what's going on the field. And I told somebody yesterday, and I said it kind of tongue in cheek, but there's something to it. One of the worst, and you want to win every game you can, right? But in retrospect, maybe winning one of three at TCU would have been more. Everybody kind of got wrapped up in that taking 2 or 3 from TCU, and whoa, we're back. Kind of in baseball is one of those sports. If you win 60% of your games, you're having a hell of a year. But taking series is important. But I think that kind of got everybody just so jacked up about Link and the change and the dynamic of the baseball program and the culture and all those things that we talk about. I think in retrospect that may have gotten us a little bit too excited.
Yeah, for that to happen on week 2 on the road, it did get everybody excited. And then I think after that, a lot of guys the injuries started to mount. And then your top pitcher, Wyatt Crowell, went out. So when you're not healthy and you don't have the depth to overcome it, it almost sounds like we're talking about football a couple of years ago when we're saying this, right? Now it's kind of those growing pains that Link Jarrett's kind of having to go through. But again, Florida State baseball now healthy again, we think. We'll see how it plays out this weekend. But this stretch it's kind of a murderer's row of top 25 games that they're going to have to navigate here. A lot of them on the road because Virginia, then Florida in Jacksonville next Tuesday. They'll be going down to Coral Gables next weekend. So it's a lot of tough opponents.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun to watch. Listen, I'm just glad there's excitement around this program, and it adds to the overall excitement about FSU athletics right now as a whole, where it's got a lot going on. Bob, I know you got to go. Thanks for joining us last minute, but I did want to get somebody else's perspective on spring practice yesterday, not just mine. So anyway, we will talk to you later, and Fish and I will kind of get into recruiting now. Fish, I've never heard you this quiet for this long.
You know what? You guys kept talking, I wasn't asked.
Usually you're good to just jump in and say, hey, this is anyway.
Listen, Bob kept going, man. What was you guys are watching spring practice. My only question to you guys, there's a lot of hype coming out of, practice from everybody. You guys have been around championship caliber teams in the past. How does this team stack up to the 2000, going into 2013 or 99 or, some of those teams? How does this team stack up going into spring practice, in your opinion, now that you've seen them?
Listen, I think it's the best team Florida State's had in the time that I've been around Tallahassee, post, at least from 2015 on. Listen, when I was around FSU championship teams, that was back in the 90s when I was in college, and I'm not sure I'm ready to tag this as a dynasty team just yet. That would be the best way I could answer the question.
Yeah, I think they're deeper. I think they're deeper than, say, the 2017 teams forward. You're seeing a lot more competition within the spring. The trouble with those Jimbo era teams is you couldn't watch practice. You couldn't make your own observations. You were kind of going off what you hear, kind of what sources are saying. We've got the luxury of watching so many practices, with the exception of the scrimmages, which would be awesome to see those scrimmages. But just to see that competition each day, I think you just feel better and better with each year about where the depth is. This whole championship train, we knew back after beating Oklahoma, we knew it was going to ramp up. We knew the expectations were coming. Yep. It's a long off season, and I think that's what players and coaches are going to have to manage, is just, okay, settle down, do your job each day, and take care of business once the season starts.
Now, I will say the one similarity I do see, Fish, is these guys seem to enjoy the competition the same way those teams did. And I think it has a way, I think that competition, and I could be wrong, we're still early in the spring practice and got to go through fall, but I do think the competition has brought this team closer together the same way those teams did. Is this team as talented as some of the teams you're talking about? No. Do they have a chance to be as good? We'll see. But certainly, I think the competition, the thing I like about it is there's some guys that are fighting for their jobs that were starters last year. And this team seems to be together. You see them walking off the practice, enjoying each other's company. You don't see a lot of fights out of practice. It seems to be and Bob mentioned expectations, and I've mentioned this several times now. I don't know if I mentioned it on this show or Keith and Tom, Front Row Knowles, or JP show, but I think Mike is very aware of the expectations, and you can certainly see his intensity each and every day. I think Mike's an intense guy and always will be, but there's no resting on a 10-3 season from the coaching standpoint from what we can see out on that field. Alex is coaching really hard. Odell is always, you can hear him yelling from a mile away. And so you have not seen, you see Adam Fuller, running onto the field trying to beat the kid, they're in scale, and he'll huddle that defensive backs and linebackers up as they're making change from one team to the next, and he'll sprint out onto the field with them. I have not had a chance to watch Surtain a great bit, but certainly, the intensity level at practice is what I have been impressed with. And then also one of the things we wondered going into practice was how physical would they be this spring because of the competition. And listen, I think I was not around last spring, but this is certainly a more physical spring than it was 2 years ago, the last time I saw spring practice, which was 2021. So I think those are all good things.
That's good to hear.
But all right, Fish, it's time to turn to you, man. We got a big weekend in Tallahassee. Bob, you're more than welcome to join us, but I know you probably want to catch the first pitch and maybe even listen to Lulu as AK Dogs has left our show. He has gone to watch and listen to Lulu, and I'm sure Lulu's got that little piece of wood and a little mini wooden bat like they do on what was that movie, Bull Durham? When the guys hit the ball in the away games because the radio team can't travel. Although I do think Lulu is there. But, Anyway, every time I think about Lulu doing a game by himself, because he usually doesn't have a color analyst, I always think of that scene in Bull Durham where they're doing the broadcast from the home stadium, even though Anyway, I digress. Bob, thanks for joining us. Fish, this is your show now, buddy.
It's all you, Fish.
All right, Fish. So, all right, Fish.
I got the pressure on me now.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, listen, this is a fast-paced show, and as you well know, as my shirt says, life moves pretty fast. All right, so listen, you did an article on a cornerback out of West Hialeah High School, Jamari Howard, earlier in the week. He's taken an unofficial visit to Florida State. He's committed to Michigan State. Kind of tell us a little bit about Jamari, where he is on FSU's board, and what you reading the tea leaves, what you think about his recruitment.
Yeah, for those that don't know, Westland Hialeah is not really well known for football talent. This kid should probably be usually he's at a Central or Northwestern, but he's a big time prospect. Randy got on him early. Someone that's, Randy likes big, long, athletic corners that have the ability to also play safety, a kind of like a Amari role, who was at University of Miami back in the day, or even a Mike Rump, who was a DB coach there. These guys that are long, versatile, athletic, they can play multiple positions. He's got a lot of ability. And, you see the schools that are after him. Mel Tucker got on him early as well, got a commitment from him. But speaking with him on the phone, I really got the feeling that this is a kid that's going to probably want to stay closer to home. Just my opinion. I mean, now he'll probably go to like USC and sign with them now that I said that, but he seems like someone, you never
a little bit different than most places far away from
No, I know, but I'm just saying he'll probably, decide to go out of state now, but he seemed like Florida State got his attention. He fits a lot of what they want to do defensively. And I think they have a legitimate shot to bring him in. You can see that they're big game hunting in the secondary this year. We've talked about it before. There was a kid from, St. Pete area that we had just, talked to earlier. That's a very good football player that they're kind of holding on right now and pumping the brakes because they feel like they could get these elite level kids. You see it with Charles Lester. This kid's one of them. You start to pull these type of guys in, your secondary gets a lot better very quickly.
Hey, what do you? I don't know if you saw the article, but we interviewed Charles Lester after his Legacy Day weekend, and of course he's got some really high profile visits in addition to Florida State. I know he's going to Georgia and Ohio State, but he said after his visit, of course now listen, you got to take some of this for what it's worth, right? We're catching these kids as they're leaving campus, and 18-year-olds, no matter how good a prospect they are, they're still impressionable. And as the kid from Texas told us, I have to reshuffle the deck after every visit because I usually enjoy the places I'm going. But he said that at heart, he's basically committed to Florida State. How do you read into that, especially when you're going to have to out-recruit Georgia and Ohio State to get him?
I think we've always said this in recruiting. One, you got to see where kids keep showing up. He's shown up on campus multiple times. I remember talking to a guy that coached at Florida State and recruited at Florida State. He always said to me, Fish, we want to get him on campus 3 times before, summer camp, through spring ball, through junior days. If we get him on campus 3 times, we feel we have a legitimate shot at landing that kid. Lester's been on campus multiple times. He's a huge FSU fan. It would almost be a CJ Spiller situation where a kid loves Florida State and decides not to go there. I mean, CJ wore Warwick Dunn's number. He was a Florida State fan and decided to choose Clemson. That's the type of scenario that would have to be with this Charles Lester kid. He just seems to be all bought into Florida State. You can tell these kids have learned how to deal with the media. But I'm sure when he walked out and he talked about Florida State and you talked to him, it's a little different than when he talked about some of the other schools. He just seems more impressionable about Florida State and what they provide. And I just think they're going to be tough to beat.
Let me ask you, and listen, this may be an unfair question because I wasn't, I didn't prep you for it or anything like that. But, one of the things that we hear, all these prospects, even some kids that were disappointed that they did not get offers coming off a visit. We've talked to a couple of those. But, this staff really does seem to make an impression on these kids. Have you talked to any kids specifically or coaches down in your area who talk about what Mike Norvell and his staff are doing and how they handle these weekends? And because really we've had a couple of prospects tell us, we don't get these kind of conversations at other places. I can't remember the young man who told us that. I'd have to go back and rack my brain from Legacy Weekend, but we hear that. We hear family from these guys, and but what do you think Mike and his staff are doing that are getting the attention of some of these higher profile kids?
Listen, every kid's different. Some kids you have to high pressure recruit them. A lot of kids don't like that. Parents don't like it. They want you. It's one thing to want a kid. It's another thing to be desperate to want a kid. And it's like anything else. The kid wants to be wanted, but they also are in a position of strength now as a staff that Florida State is up there now because of the 10-win season, having the season they've had last season. They can now, the ball's in their court. Like they decide who they want to bring on campus, who they want, where before they were almost not begging kids to come, but it was a lot more difficult when they were, they won 3 games the first year and 5 the second. It's a lot easier now that they're in a position of strength. And I just think winning changes everything. The message sounds different when it comes to the coaches. Listen, you've been in these recruiting offices. These coaches all say a lot of the same things. There's no magic pill to like none of them are that great at convincing a kid. It's when you have the logo and you have the winning and you were at USF. It was a lot harder recruiting there than it was at Florida State, and especially because Florida State was winning. It's all where you're at, and the message sounds a lot better. Like I said, when you're winning, it's a lot harder to sell vision to a lot of kids. Hey, this is what we're going to look like. Come here. Some guys are good at it. I always remember listening. I always go back to what Schiano had to do when he first got to Rutgers, and they had only won like 1 game their first year. And the message of, we're going to play for a national championship and this and that. And, some of them, the message sounds better, I guess. I mean, it's just they're better at doing it. But they're doing a great job right now. They're getting these kids on campus. And like I said, the more times they get them on campus, that's where the family atmosphere. If these kids keep coming, they feel like eventually even though they're not part of the team right at that moment, they start to feel like, oh, man, I could picture myself hanging out with these guys. I could picture myself playing with that Seminole spear on the side of my helmet. I can picture myself running on that field and listening to the war chant. You start to visualize yourself being part of that program, and they've done a very good job of that, making these kids believe that that's where they belong.
Yeah, you're right. Listen, Ashton Hampton, the defensive back from Florida High, was on campus yesterday. He mentioned, he's in Tallahassee, but he's never had a chance to hang around the players. And he even mentioned when he talked to him post-practice that it was fun to listen to what the players had to say. Excuse me. And that was something that was different about this visit than some of his other unofficial visits. So, and then to your point, I know several coaches who always say the better the player, the better coach I was. And I think you're right. The better the logo, the better recruiter you are, particularly when you're coming off a 10-win season. So I think that has a lot to do with it too. But listen, it's impressive what they're doing. They're bringing in another great group of expected recruits here this weekend for Saturday scrimmage, which of course will be closed to us. But as I said, the Osceola will have staff on site to try to grab some of these prospects as they're leaving. 2 commitments that are expected to be there are C.J. Hurd, the safety prospect from Woodward Academy in College Park, Georgia, who has been committed to Florida State since July of 2022, and then Jamari Flagg, who is at Booker T. And any new intel on them? They seem to be solid guys committed to Florida State, but how important is it to get these guys back on campus, even though they are committed?
Once again, when you have committed players, they become more wanted. It basically puts a target on going back, and I always like talking about conversations I've had with coaches. I remember a kid committing to Florida State, and I asked this one coach, "Oh, you got a commitment from him?" He goes, "Fish, it's a lot harder now. Now that he's committed, there's a target on his back,
Yep.
and we got to win, so we don't have to go against negative recruiting." And a lot of times coaches don't want that commitment out right away because now they know what they're that those other staffs are dealing with to try to pull the kid away from Florida State. Now, one thing seeing your list that's nice is linebackers do exist. They are recruiting them. They got that's the one question on these websites that they keep asking. And I looked at your list, and there was at least 4 or 5. That's enough really for FSU to have a 2 deep.
Yeah, so, the crazy thing is, Fish, most of these guys are coming from outside the state of Florida too.
Listen, I've talked about this. It's a very hard position to evaluate now. A lot of kids in high school, especially in Florida, don't play linebacker. They want to rush the passer or they want to cover somebody. They don't want to play between the tackles and have to tackle somebody. They want to run downhill and chase. And that's the thing is there's just not a lot of traditional linebackers. And I had this discussion yesterday. I was with a friend of mine. Like, you go to Georgia. Georgia has 2 elite linebackers this year in their state. Like, guys that you're like, wow, these are the guys that you remember playing at Florida State, whether it's the Derek Brookses, the types of Marvin Jones. Like, where those days have gone. I mean, we're happy with Bethune and Deloche, and they're good players, but they're not – I don't even think they're to the level of a Telvin Smith, and it's like these guys just don't seem to exist anymore. So now that we see your list, it's nice to see some linebackers on there. Maybe the noise will quiet about FSU and recruiting linebackers.
Yeah, and to Fish's point, we have got some questions about that, and one of the questions is about some 2025 kids. But just to go over the list at linebacker for who is expected on campus either today or tomorrow, today and tomorrow, really. But Monte Whedon, he is the fifth ranked player in the state of Maryland / Washington, D.C., 6'1", 210. He is supposed to be on campus. I got a chance to watch his film. Listen, he is a tackling machine. The players go backwards. He is certainly an inside linebacker. And, an inside linebacker anymore is kind of a tweener, right, Fish? You see a lot of 4.25s. There's really you don't see a whole lot of true middle linebackers, but he is a guy, certainly an in-the-box guy. And if you get a chance to watch his film, I think you'll be impressed. And then, of course, you've got Aaron Childs, who is a 4-star prospect for 2024 out of Good Counsel in Ole, Maryland. He is the state's number 1 ranked player, the number 2 ranked inside linebacker in America by Rivals. He is tentatively supposed to be on campus. So you do have some players coming on campus that, Florida State probably needs to see. I think there's a couple more linebackers. You've got, you've got Jalen Parnell, who's a 2025 kid out of Pascagoula High School in Pascagoula, Mississippi.
Oh, man, it's been a while. Who was from Pascagoula?
Terrell Buckley.
Yeah. What was his nickname? Well, he had a nickname with the
Pascagoula from Pascagoula.
It's been a while.
Yeah, I think that was because and then, of course, he is the 11th ranked outside linebacker in the nation and a Rivals top 250 for 2025. So you are starting to see them bring more linebackers on campus, and I'm sure there'll be a couple more besides that. But those are the guys that we have tentatively set to be on campus.
It's nice to see those Maryland kids. The DC Maryland kids. Florida State's had a lot of luck recruiting that area. In the past, it seemed like they went away from it. You go all the way back. They had the corner that they landed from Maryland and ended up in the NFL on their national championship caliber, championship team. You had the defensive tackle, Goodman. They've had those guys. It's always good. I believe one of the linebackers they are bringing in. I thought I saw him on one of the lists is Marlon Huff, who's another Dillard. He's a linebacker. He's more of an old school Mike. He's about 6'2", 235 pounds. give you some size. He's strictly a Mike linebacker, so it'll be interesting if they recruit him and offer him eventually.
Yeah, they also had a kid out of yeah, I did see Marlon yesterday. He was here yesterday, as a matter of fact. What you think he's a legit prospect for Florida State?
He's, like I said, he's more of a he's a 2-down linebacker. I don't know if he's one of those guys really. A lot of these guys, they want these guys to be able to cover, play in space. He's very good against the run. He's super physical. I mean, I saw him do Oklahoma drills and inside run drills at Dillard, and he was just laying people out. He's a big physical guy. He can play somewhat in space, but you're not going to want to put another team's top tight end. If you have like the kid that you had, the Myers kid at Notre Dame a couple of years ago, you don't want to put Marlon on that kid. It's going to be a mismatch. It is for most linebackers, but you want more of these guys that are bigger, more athletic, that can run with these guys.
Yep. And it looks like they may get Jordan Seaton, the number 1 offensive tackle in the nation, on campus. I think he had put something on Twitter about a possible visit. And kind of, what are your thoughts on getting a kid that big in stature?
Yeah, I had the chance to see him play last year against Chaminade. He kind of struggled. He's a big guy. I mean, really big. You could tell when he's out there, he just looks different than the rest of the offensive linemen. I just think the speed was something that he wasn't used to. Chaminade played a lot of undersized guys, and that's a hard thing. I remember going all the way back to Sam Young, who was like 6'9" in high school. When they played guys that were 5'10", 5'11", maybe 6 feet, it's hard for those guys to dip and bend to get down to that level on pass rushers that are really, really undersized, which they're not going to face in college, So I think some of that, once he learns to adjust to the speed, I think he has all the physical traits. He's a big physical guy. He moves well laterally. He's a tackle. Florida State needs tackles. We've discussed this. They got plenty of guys that can play guard. It's those big, long, athletic guys that you've seen it with Lucas Simmons. Guys that are that big and long and athletic, they're hard to get around. I don't care how fast you are off the ball. It's a cab ride around them, and that's you've seen that with Luke. No, it's the difference between 6'2", 6'3", and 6'7", 6'8". It's just a wider body. That guy takes one step, it's like 2.5 bodies of a guy that's 6'3", So that's why you want a guy like Jordan, and if they could land someone like that, it'd be a big time get.
Yeah, and just some other guys that are going to be on the camp. And Fish, if anybody strikes you as something you got to say, just dive in. But Aaron Childs, a four-star linebacker, who we've already talked about a little bit, from Good Counsel in Olney, Maryland. Then Joseph Jonah Ajanye from Oak Ridge, Texas, Conroe, Texas, Oak Ridge High School. He is in Arrival's top 250 prospect for this year, ranked the 15th best strong side defensive end in the nation. So we've already talked about Jamari. Marcus Easley is supposed to be another 4-star offensive tackle, ranked 23rd best offensive tackle in America from Kankakee, Illinois.
That's listen, it's Kankakee, and my wife will kill you if you say it wrong, because every time I go up to it's north of Chicago. It's like in between like Chicago when you're heading towards Wisconsin or whatever. But it's amazing that they're recruiting a kid out of
Hey, it's got to be hard to get Big Ten is offensive line.
Listen, Brett Bielema is one of the best O-line coaches, and he does a great job of getting O-linemen not only into college but the NFL. You got to figure this kid's got to go by. I remember FSU was actually recruiting one time way back when, a kid out of Madison, Wisconsin, and I said to the FSU coach, you got to go through a lot of Midwest states. From this kid's got Minnesota, Illinois, Michigan, Ohio State, Iowa, like you got to compete with a lot of people, and God bless him. Listen, this is one of those kids you're going to have to get on campus probably 3 times before the summer comes to really have a legitimate shot.
Yeah, that's true, because the recruiting calendar is so different. We start talking to all these kids, and most of especially the high-profile kids, are taking at least some, if not all, their official visits in the summer. And I think you continue to see that trend. We also see Florida State continuing its Louisiana relationships, Teron Francis, a 4-star wide receiver, 2025 out Edna Carr, supposed to be on campus. Robert Bourdon, another 2024 offensive lineman out of Collierville, Tennessee, is going to be on campus. Joshua Jackson, a receiver from St. Augustine in New Orleans, is going to be on campus. We've already talked a little bit about Jalen Parnell, the 11th rated player. Top 250 for Rivals for 2025 is going to be on campus. So, listen, it's kind of going to be a star-studded event. I've asked Bob this question, and you've probably followed it a little bit even closer than him. How far has recruiting come under Mike in these 3 years?
Well, they've done a lot better job of getting better players on campus. It's a process, though. You have to recruit a certain level and then recruit above that level. You can't go from F all the way up to A. You got to gradually take baby steps up, and they've gotten better players than the ones that they have on campus before. We talked to you guys. I've heard a lot of people talking about the safety they signed out of Mississippi, how well he's doing. We liked his film. I remember watching his film with you and telling you, hey, listen, this kid.
You come out Quindarius.
Yeah. And we've talked about how we thought he was better than the guys they brought in before. Listen, a lot of the star rankings, I think the guys do a very good job now compared to 20 years ago. But still, a lot of these kids get overlooked. I mean, you see it happen all the time. That's why when the NFL draft comes around, you look at the corner out of Illinois. He was from Pensacola. The guy's projected as a first-round pick. I don't think any of the Florida schools gave him the time of day. So
everybody develops at their own rate.
Yeah.
I think sometimes colleges miss out because they don't. There's so much pressure to get these kids committed early and get them on board, and some kids don't really blossom until they're a senior. And if you've been picked over by then.
Well, and there's certain schools, and I'm not going to mention them, but the schools in the SEC or even top schools in the ACC, it's a business. They recruit you. They expect you to be able to play. And if you don't play, they'll pass. They're going to recruit to the next guy. When you get a kid to an Illinois, or you get one of these guys that goes to a UConn or one of these schools that's not a traditional power school, those schools recruit a kid from Florida. They have the investment. They have to make that kid work. He has to pan out. The other schools can just basically recruit over him. Illinois needs that kid to pan out, or the next guy up is, you basically scraps. And you know how that is. That's why those guys, there's an evaluation period. You got to be patient and make sure that, hey, the kid is going to struggle early. There is a transition from high school to college. And if you're patient, a lot of times you're rewarded. Like, that's why you see so many of these kids go out of state and they have success, and people go, oh, why didn't Florida State and Miami recruit them? Well, they wouldn't have probably done the same thing if they had gone to one of those schools. They had the patience of that staff. That staff was willing to work with them, where maybe a kid comes to one of the big three and it's a business and they're like, all right, this kid's good, but we could get better next year. We don't want to spend, all this time coaching this kid up when we could just get somebody better.
Yeah, listen, I think that's sometimes why you see these group of 5 teams, or maybe a lower, what is usually considered a lower tier Power 5 school, have these nice little 2 and 3 year runs, because some of these bigger schools took kids early, commitments from kids early, and signed them because they had impressive sophomore and junior seasons, and then you get a kid that develops late as a senior, and instead now he's going to a kid that could play at a Power 5 is now going to East Carolina or a USF or you name it. A Tulane who had a great run this season. They have to wait a little bit longer in the process, and sometimes that's, as you said, sometimes patient.
I think you look at Jared Verse. If Verse had signed with Florida State or a big school out of high school, he'd probably never be in the position he is. But he had to work hard to put him in that position. He was probably better than an Albany, I'm pretty sure, coming out of high school.
Yeah.
I'm sure Syracuse, which they had signed him. But that's what some of those guys need that time to develop and not be pressured of like, oh, if I didn't make a play this game or that game or this first season, maybe my scholarship's going to be pulled. There's not that pressure. They know that there's time for them to develop. So
I agree. All right, so we'll move on from Florida State recruiting, at least on campus this weekend. And, usually, Fish, you get to kind of go sink your toes in the sand on the weekends down there in sunny South Florida. But we're gonna keep you busy this weekend. You got the Miami Rivals camp / combine. I believe the camp is tomorrow, or combine, or vice versa. But anyway, I believe it's 2 days worth of action. One is kind of a cattle call where anyone can come and go through the combine, and I believe the Sunday deal is more invite only camp style. Just kind of explain to our listeners, viewers, exactly what the difference is between a camp and a combine that Rivals does, and kind of some of the guys you're looking forward to seeing, I guess.
I mean, the combine is pretty much similar, like what you see in the NFL combine. They'll run the 40, do short shuttle, but the camps is more individual learning, and then they bring the guys together to do one-on-ones, whether it's running backs versus linebackers, wide receivers, DBs, O-line, D-line. I love to go for the O-line, D-line, because a lot of times a lot of kids get overlooked that can play at a high level, guys that can play. And, most of the time, a lot of those guys, if they don't have offers, guys kind of overlook them. So I'm always trying to be the one that finds that hidden gem at one of these events, or somebody that's maybe everybody else is ignoring. So it's fun from that standpoint. I'm excited because I usually wasn't allowed to go to the Rivals camps. They didn't let me in. So this is like I was in the black book for like the last 10 years. Whenever I went to a Rivals camp, they'd be like, is Fish there? Fish there? You got to make sure, don't let him in. But I'm actually going to be on the list this year to get in there.
Well, listen, I cannot believe no one would let your very award-winning personality come through the gates. That's just hard for me to believe. You're one of the easiest people to get along with that I know.
Oh,
actually,
man.
I love it. You're one of my favorate people to argue with, to be quite honest.
Well, we've had a few battles, but we could chuckle about it,
Well, that's right. Listen, that's listen, I don't even consider it an argument. It's just a discussion, right? I mean, we're talking things out, sometimes with some colorful language. But that's what makes football fun, right? We're both passionate about it. We both see things, and hey, we've both been right, we've both been wrong, and all of those things will continue to be the same. But all right, so Fish, you will be getting back to us next week about who you see and what you see from the Rivals camp in Miami. And of course, right now we have plans to go to the Rivals camp / combine in Atlanta in April, which unfortunately falls on the weekend of the spring game / showcase. It looks like I'm going to draw the short straw and be in Atlanta and not be able to watch the whole goal through the fun spring game weekend where there's going to be golf tournaments and tailgate parties. And they're going to send me up there. I'll be the only person with the Osceola actually working on spring game.
How did I know they were going to push you out of the spring game and you're going to have to go do that event? How did I know that?
I don't know, man. It's crazy. It's crazy. But listen, it'll be fun to be up there. I've not been to a combine in a long time, and of course, having run camps at South Florida for 5 of my 7 seasons at the University of South Florida. I'm always fascinated to watch how people organize and run these large camps. Like one of the coolest things to go to my first year that Mike was here was his mega camp. To see how the hell they were going to run that thing. That was very impressive.
They pull it off.
And I remember thinking the night before, that night before camp started at South Florida, I would be especially that sling and shoot / big man passing camp where we'd have almost 1,500 to 2,000 kids on campus. I did not sleep a wink.
Yeah. That was always my favorite camp because I truly believe I've gotten more players from the sling and shoot event than any other event. I mean, I remember guys like Trey McKitty who were at Wesley Chapel, or like kids, Dante Fowler. I mean, it was that one camp that you had. It didn't matter, Booker T, Plant. It didn't matter what school it was, Armwood. Every school wanted to be at Sling and Shoot. So you got a chance to go in and see their young kids and get their names early. And I mean, I used to walk out of there with like 200-300 names after Now, I also ended up torched from the sun because it was brutal on those, artificial fields. But I mean, it would take me like 2 months to enter every kid from that event.
The weird thing is, Fish, the June, because we had two back then. We had two sling and shoots and two big mans. We had one that like the second week of June, as soon as school got let out.
And then July.
And June was always the hotter of the two. I can remember sitting out there, it would be like 111 degrees, and the trainers trying to make sure we're not going too fast or too hard. And, then July was the one that you'd have 64 teams. And listen, I'll never forget this. Now, the guy that used to help me when Skip was the head coach, my main assistant for sling and shoot was a guy named Steve Bird. Steve was a great receiver at Eastern Kentucky, long-time coaching veteran. I think he's at South Carolina State now with a good friend of mine named Buddy Pugh, has been there forever as South Carolina State's head coach. But anyway, so we're sitting there after the Saturday round of games, and we're sitting in the offensive staff room, and Steve and I are we're saying, all right, well, here, this is how everybody's won, and because you got the 4 play-in games, and then you bracket everybody based off records. And Skip walks into the offensive staff room and goes, by the way, we need to shuffle divisions. So we had to redo the entire bracket because we had bracket A and bracket B basically. We had, then we'd have a final 4 for each bracket, then a champion from each bracket, then the champions for both brackets would play each other. And he made us reshuffle the entire deck. I'm sure there was a really good reason for that, but we set up all night Saturday night reshuffling, and so. But it's always a fun camp, and of course, the funnest part with that was the coaches' socials. I loved hanging out with the high school coaches. Even when we had the team padded camp, I used to get the penthouse room at the Embassy Suites, and we'd stay up to 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning hanging out with the high school coaches. And all the thing that was great about that at USF was all the assistant coaches would hang around as long as they possibly could, and that's one of the reasons South Florida was.
No, that was listen. I remember going back to the days of Rutgers, and Gianna would invite all the coaches up. They'd have the social inside the football stadium, and it was at night. It would start at like 6 o'clock and go to like midnight, and they'd have food and drinks up there, and it was the best part because that's where I met a lot of coaches, and coaches started to respect me in this business as they'd see me at that camp in the social, and they'd be like, oh, Fish, I didn't know you did this and this. And they thought I was just some like fan that was running a fan website, and that's how I got to where I did in this business, is talking to these coaches. And, I'd meet a coach in New Jersey or a guy from another state, and I'd help one of their kids. And then all of a sudden the next year, hey man, you did a great job with that kid. I appreciate it. Can you help the other kids on the team? Yeah, sure. And that's how this thing built to where it is now.
Yeah, it was fun. I got to be such good friends with Mike Gottman, who was the long-time head coach at Durant, who's somewhere else now. Then you had Bob from Eastlake, Bob Hudson at Eastlake. I got to be extremely close with those guys because they were kind of the backbone of our team padded camp, which I don't think they even have padded camps really much anywhere anymore. Summer football camps are great. It was a lot more fun when I was just working them than running them. Because running them, you have to solve everything. I can remember one time Skip calling me. I had a golf cart, so did he, because we had 3 different playing locations: the practice fields, the intramural fields, and then they just opened up a new set of intramural fields. And he goes, "All right, there's a problem on field, whatever. You need to get over there and solve it, because I can't deliver bad news to a high school coach. You can't."
Oh God.
So.
Oh man, poor Pat. Poor Pat. Now I know why you are the way you are, man.
That's right.
I've got the therapy part down for you, man.
Yeah, that's right. I probably do need counseling. You're probably right. But speaking of counseling, let's move away kind of just from and listen. This is non-Florida State related, non-recruiting related, just kind of football related. What do you take of this? You paid much attention to this whole Aaron Rodgers, Green Bay, New York Jets thing?
It's great. I'm a huge Aaron Rodgers fan, and I 2 years ago when Dallas was negotiating with Dak, I would have told Dak, "Hey, hit the rocks," and I would have just brought in Aaron to win a Super Bowl. But I thought by now he was already signed by the Jets. I had no idea he hasn't signed with them. I mean, they've signed his buddies, so like, what's happening? What's the deal?
Well, yeah, that's what's weird to me is, all right, I think it's got to be compensation, either draft pick wise from Green Bay's standpoint, or maybe even monetarily from Aaron's standpoint from the Jets. But here's the thing, and I'm like you, I've been a huge Packers fan for a long time. Was a Cowboys fan growing up. When they fired Tom Landry, I was done with Jerry Jones. I had to find a new team, and my new team as a kid ended up being the Green Bay Packers because they wore the same uniforms we wore in high school, so it was just how it was. So I've been a Packers fan now for close to 30 years. And the way Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre have chose to exit and with all the drama, but here's what strikes me as funny about Aaron Rodgers. And it's almost coming across like a jilted teenager. All right, so he goes into this period of darkness.
Yep.
And previous to the going in, he was 90% committed to retiring. Then he comes out of the period of darkness and hears that the Packers have made a decision and they're ready to move on. And then all of a sudden, he wants to play again. He's recommitted to the game. If I was the Jets, out of all the things that are going on, that is the one thing I would pay attention to, because once you start thinking about retiring from something or quitting something, no matter what it is, it's hard to talk yourself out of that mentality. And I just don't think there's any way that he stays with the Jets for 2 years if he was. And I don't know if I would want the trade if I was the Jets if he's not committed to 2 years. Anyway, I just think the whole thing's fascinating. And
listen, the Jets haven't won since Joe Namath. It's like, is it worth 1 year of enjoyment? Like, you know, look at the Marlins fans. You know, the Marlins have won 2 championships and they've just destroyed the teams after. Was it worth it? And some fan bases will say, hell yeah. Cleveland Indian fans would love to have a World Series championship and probably would give up 10 more bad years after it. So,
well, now it's the Cleveland Guardians. So
Guardians. Oh, sorry.
It's hard to get used to, isn't it? It's really hard to get used to.
But I'm saying, like, the Jets fans may take one great year and worth all the hard headaches with Rodgers just to say, you know what, we did it, than to continue to just be terrible.
So would a great year mean playoffs and not necessarily a Super Bowl?
Listen, the Chiefs are very good. I think that they'd have a very good shot at making a run at the Super Bowl with Rodgers. They've got a lot of young talent. If the running back could come back healthy, I still think the Jets would probably draft another running back later in the draft to help that guy until he comes back. But they've got a lot of very good pieces on their team. They probably need 1 or 2 linemen, and they're ready to go. You know how it is year to year. You don't know what you're going to get in the NFL. I mean, you look at some of these teams; they're good 1 year, and the next year they're terrible. So I'd make the decision to go after Rodgers and give him what he wants if I'm a Jets fan, just because they've been bad for so long. You get tired of losing.
Yeah, well, let me ask you a question about, I guess, a guy with South Florida ties, Lamar Jackson. What do you think is going to happen with all that? A lot of people.
It's crazy what the Ravens have done with him. The guy's worth. Listen, I wouldn't have given Dak the money they gave him. I would give Lamar the money before I gave Dak with the Cowboys. And they're fighting over this thing. They should give him what he wants at this point. The Ravens. I think if you take Lamar off that team, you saw last year, they were nowhere near the same team with the backup quarterback. And they haven't really given him
he made the Pro Bowl. Tyler Huntley made the Pro Bowl, man. Yeah. What are you talking about?
What, a flag football game he made?
No, he really did make the Pro Bowl.
He made the Pro Bowl. How many guys turned it down before he did?
20?
Yeah.
Every starting quarterback in the NFL decided not to go.
Man.
Listen, I think what's happening with this is this is a knee-jerk reaction by the entire NFL to what the Deshaun Watson contract was. And I just don't think you're going to see I don't think any of these franchises are going to mortgage their whole future on one player. And, listen, I think what they need to do is probably similar to what they've done, to offer him 3 years guaranteed at a little bit above what the exclusive tag would be. And, because I don't think he's going to get the same contract. Listen, I didn't think Deshaun Watson should have got the contract that he got.
No, he won't get it, but they also could give him maybe more money up front, front
Yeah.
loaded, and just give him more guaranteed money up front, and then basically, there's options after that, based on whether they want him after that or he wants to stay with them.
But we are sitting here it's almost April, and two of the best quarterbacks on the entire planet do not know where if they're going to play next year. A combination of those two things. All right, so let's talk a little bit about March Madness. My bracket got busted basically the first weekend, so I'm not really paying attention to my bracket anymore. But did you happen to watch any of that FAU Tennessee game last night?
Yeah, I watched it, and man, that coach is going to be a hot commodity. I'd like to be his agent.
Hey, there's going to be some jobs that open, and I think Texas Tech is still open. There may be others.
I'm not going to lie. I grew up with the UNLV running Rebels and watching Duke and Leitner, and the one difference is just the lack of great players in college basketball. I mean, Drew Timmy's I'm going to give him all the credit in the world. He's a heck of a basketball player, but when he's one of the top players in the tournament, like I don't even think on that Duke team, he would have been coming off the bench as good as he is on those Leitner teams.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
You know what I'm saying? Like
Cherokee Parks, all those guys.
So it's fun to watch. I had heard the talk about UConn before the tournament, so I actually picked them to go to the finals because I heard all these experts, and I watched them, and they're the only team that actually looks like a team that played 10 years ago. They are huge. I mean, their guys are all big. Every guy from their guards to their centers are all over. It's like they're like 6'6", 6'7", and then their centers are like 7. I don't see anybody beating them. I don't know. I don't know basketball but like football, but if watch them lose tonight. But if that team loses in this tournament the rest of the way, that other team's pretty darn good because UConn's got all the talent in the world.
Yeah, they are really good. Of course, now watching the FAU Tennessee game, which is the game I watched last night, I didn't watch any of the others.
It was fun, man.
We didn't get back to practice till late, but that kind of reminded me of a real life Hoosiers because Tennessee looked like an NBA team size wise compared to FAU, who looked much smaller, and it was kind of like the modern day version of Hoosiers, where the coach would go in and say, "Hey, the rims are 10 feet high, the court's 96 feet long. It's the same dimension."
But if you watch the Duke game, and they played very well, I think they just intimidated Duke. Like Duke was a better team. If you watch both of them, they were the better team. Tennessee, I didn't think was as impressive as everybody thought they looked in that game. Other than they were bullies. They looked like the Detroit Pistons. They were just bullying Duke, and Duke never seemed to recover. And they didn't make them pay with the 3-point plays. But FAU, man, that game got close at the end, and then all of a sudden, I think they hit a big three, and they never backed down from Tennessee. They weren't scared of them, and they were actually more athletic. They were able to get to the hoop a lot easier than even Duke was. So, I mean, FAU's an underrated team. They're very good. I wouldn't count them out. I know they play. I think they play UConn next, possibly, which will be.
Yeah. They're all in the Elite Eight. You know what's so funny is, listen, in the background when I'm working, I'll listen to Cal Hurd or Rich Eisen or one of, 20 podcasts, radio, TV shows. I can remember about a month before the season started, somebody saying, and it might have been, I don't know if it was ESPN, Fox, radio podcast, but I remember somebody saying, sometimes you hear things on radio or television that make your ears pop up. And the guy said, everybody better watch out for FAU. And I kind of think, well, he's got a buddy that coaches at FAU, or he's got a kid that plays at FAU. I didn't take it seriously at all. And of course, then you watch them, and now, they're going to kind of turn into America's sweetheart for the next 36 hours at least until they play in that Elite Eight game. They'll be they are the Cinderella story this year.
They're for real though. They're not. Listen, you don't win 33-something games by accident.
Nope.
You're not that good every night. I mean, you look at UConn. UConn's a 4 seed. I don't know what their record is, but that team really should be a 1 seed or worse 2 seed. So, like, if you're good, you're going to stand out, and they're very good. FAU. Like I said, I was surprised. They're not the biggest team, but they are very athletic. They can run. They got good players, and you know what? Once again, these kids, they are all guys he recruited. They weren't transfer portal kids. These guys are guys that developed in that system, and it shows you that you could still win the old way of now. Kansas State's all transfers, but FAU is a team that they've built from the bottom up, and this guy's done a great job of building that team up.
Yeah, what a great story about that kid from Kansas State who had been at Florida and obviously collapsed on the floor at Florida State. I did not know if you ever play again, and hats off to him. That takes a lot of courage to come back from something like that. But all right, Fish, listen, we got spring practice, we got March Madness, we got rivals camps and combines, a ton of stuff going on. You and I both have very, very busy weekends, which will turn into very busy weeks next week. So, listen, it's always fun to hang out. I think we've been on here for about an hour and 10 minutes, so we've given our viewers and listeners an extended version of Seminole Sidelines. But
it's been fun, man. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's always good to talk a little bit about Florida State, a little bit about what's going on around the world of sports. And we hope everybody enjoyed it. Obviously, you can catch us every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 12:30 on Osceola Facebook, Osceola YouTube, and Osceola Twitter. We are live. Please let us know. You feel free to comment when we have these shows. And if you're not a subscriber to the Osceola, you can go to theosceola.com or floridastate.rivals.com. Check us out. We do have some articles behind the paywall. We do that you'd have to subscribe to see, but we also have some free content on Olympic sports, some of our football practice reports, and obviously some free information on recruiting. So please check us out. We will have a very active message board this weekend with the kids that are coming in on campus. Again, they're expecting about 3 or 4 dozen prospects on campus from 2024 to 2026. Practice will be closed on Saturday to the media, but we will be hanging out around the Moore Center and try to catch up with some of the higher profile recruits as they are leaving their unofficial visits. And we'll have articles throughout next week. Fish will report on what he saw from the rivals camps. Probably will have some new prospects to keep an eye on as he watches guys go through individual drills and 7-on-7 and pass pro and those type of things. But please check us out. If you're not an Osceola subscriber, please go to theosceola.com or floridastate.rivals.com. You'll end up at the same place. Check us out. Please subscribe if you like what we see and if you enjoy what you hear here on our Osceola YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter pages with Seminole Sidelines. And Fish, have a great weekend, and everyone will be back next week, and appreciate you tuning in. Have a great weekend.
Take it easy.